Well, I think we have made the equivalent shift of going from the record to the song and playlist. We've gone through in some ways, a democratization of the functional elements of creating and using learning. And in that shift, we've leveraged the fact that much of what the tool sets are and the self-confidence is about building out a learning asset or resource are no longer uniquely held by learning and development people. Any business leader can whip out their iPad or their Android tablet and do almost HD quality video of someone, and it's done. And so I do think it's an interesting moment because it's had the equivalent of what happened when the album was deconstructed into songs, and then the goal was not to have people have an album that had 10 songs, but rather a playlist that might have one song from this album, one song from that album. It led to the personalization of people's music. And we believe a similar shift is happening and will happen in the learning and development world. I spend more time looking at technology, conversations, theory from outside the learning and development world. There was a wonderful interview I read recently from this guy Hoffman. He was one of the co-founders of LinkedIn. And he was talking about how a piece of data changes the molecule that changes the behavior that changes the marketplace. So for instance, if you think about Uber, somebody wrote a program and the net result was changing the marketplace of how, people buy rides. I look for inspiration and guidance and metaphors increasingly outside the learning and development field. So I look towards filmmakers, I look to philosophers, I look towards people in the technology area, but not the learning technology area. And finally, I look towards learners. I'm an avid, imposing interviewer of people who randomly end up next to me on airplanes, and during the flight, I will be interviewing that person about how they learn, and they're wonderful sources of information. Now, I obviously look towards colleagues, some of them, my colleagues over in England, Don Taylor and Nigel Payne and others, And I find learning colleagues are always fascinating. But even in those conversations, Nigel is more likely to share with me a piece of technology he's seen that's not a learning technology, but is a conversation about something changing in the world that could, and I use the word could, impact learning. Often it doesn't, I'm going to give you one that is a risky one because it could be very exciting or it could be Second Life 2.0, and it is that, and I know there's not one word that goes with it. It's that combination of what we're now looking at with 360 video, with an element of VR or virtual reality, and really focused on the learner or the viewer as the ultimate director to figure out what I'm looking at, in what angle, in what way. Now, why I think that's most provocative is why I think on-the-job training works so well. If we go back in time, the concept that I could be working in a factory and I'm learning from the person who's next to me. Inevitably, my eyes will go to that which I'm curious about. I look at it from one angle, I look at them doing it. The dilemma with traditional digital learning is we only gave the learner one view, which was whatever the designer did. But I get really intrigued if the learner has the ability to steer, and immerse and even get to, and by the way, this isn't there today, but really get to relatively low-cost simulations or emulations that let them fail multiple times on their way to success. So that's my zone. Now, in order for that to work, we've got to hope that Facebook buying Oculus, Microsoft with HoloLens, the work that Google is doing on artificial intelligence that may go into this. So there's a lot of things cooking here, and they're not baked yet. But that's probably, for me, one of the most intriguing elements. But the other piece that's sort of the friend of that is the rise of video. We're tracking a number now that around 63% of the times a learner goes out to learn something, they end up at a video. And by the way, a short video, like more likely a 3-minute or 6-minute rather than a 1 hour or 3 hour video. And I think that's profound because I think it means we're more immersively moving into the watching world than the reading world, and I think that's got some really interesting and challenging, consequences. But, at the same time, we don't know how to search for video easily. We don't always know where to store it corporately. We don't know when to remove it when it's no longer relevant. So it is a shift that's going on. I would love to see us accept that multiple cycles are needed for a learner to gain confident competence. Now, what I mean by multiple cycles, I realize if I look at myself that I usually need to learn something twice in two different ways. Meaning I need to watch the video or read the PDF or take the e-learning, and then I need to usually go do it. Or maybe I need to go do it and then watch something again. So it's this concept that, nobody assumes they're going to get on a bicycle the first time and ride well. They're going to have to get on, experiment, fail, and the like. I think we've gotten deceptive, to use a direct word, that we have a single squirt approach to teaching and learning. I can go to the whiteboard, write it out, make an e-learning module and send it out, make a video and send it out, and boom, they're going to see it, get it, and keep it and transfer it. And, one of my early mentors, Malcolm Knowles, said mastery takes time. Mastery is the multiple cycles of doing something. And so that's probably, if I were to look at a change, that would be where it would be. One view is where we really do democratize it, to where L&D is creating significantly less content. We're doing much less in the way of prescriptive learning, and we're shifting to where knowledge is routinely created and shared and mastery built at the business unit and level. And the L&D people may be, if you will, mentors or editors to that process, okay? So that's one reality. The other reality is the machine learning Amazon buying model. I yearn for an LMS that can do to the learner what Amazon does to the buyer. You know, Amazon knows what I buy, what I bought, at what price level. It reminds me if a new product comes up that I might want to buy it. It's predictive, it's machine-based, meaning it's got some artificial intelligence or cognitive processing behind it. And so that model is all in. You know, the first is sort of all out. It's everywhere. The other one is that, you know, we've got a very smart, intelligent colleague that is the machine, you know, and maybe it looks like Siri, or maybe it looks like Alexa from Amazon or Home from Google, and it could, in fact, make its way then back to what we talked about earlier, which is more emulation, more cycles of things. You know, let me learn that thing 3 times over 3 months, and also much better use of big data, big learning data, and small learning data. You know, big data is kind of how everybody's learning that. Small data is how am I learning that. So I think these are really different, but in a funky way, they may actually be cousins in that process. Well, I would be enormously disruptive to myself. I think the challenge is we tend to know, network, and learn from people who are similar to ourselves. You know, I was at a big company, and there were a group of millennials who I was meeting with, and one of them sort of asked me the question, and and they were very millennial-like. Most of the women were wearing these flip-flop shoes, you know, and so I said, when have you learned from somebody who isn't wearing flip-flops? You know, have you eaten lunch with somebody who's losing their hair? You know, like, and what I was saying is, I think the value as a 21-year-old is to have no boundaries. No boundaries. You know, you're 21. You have nothing to lose. Even if you lose the job, you have nothing to lose. But ironically, a lot of 21-year-olds are very homogeneous. You know, they hang out and learn from people who are similar to them. And my advice to a 21-year-old is disrupt yourself, you know, and literally become much more diverse in who you learn from, how you learn, and where you learn.